Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media, welcoming our listeners, our viewers to the various platforms of Salam Media this evening. Tonight, another edition with myself, Inayet Wadee. It's called Wednesday Nights with Inayet Wadee, where we tackle major issues right across the entire globe. And one of the big issues that we need to talk about, and it is absolutely critical that we take this discussion and understand what some of the underlying issues are the hijab ban in Karnataka out in India. Now, clearly, from many quarters, this hijab ban has been referred to as inhuman, as communal, and also at the same time, we see the ruling party in India, the BJP, defending the ban, talking about disturbing the uniformity among students. But it is clear that for a very, very long time, where we've seen fundamentalists in India groups clearly sense and taking this opportunity over the hijab issue and using it to further radicalize Indian society. Now, together with this, we've seen so much happen in India over a period of time, and the whole concept of Hindutva again has become a major talking point and also part of the larger agenda of some of these Hindutva groups to impose laws in the name of being a secular country. Now, we have assembled a panel tonight to take this discussion further on the Karnataka hijab ban. We've got Farhana Motala, who is a researcher at Justice for All. We've got Fatima Domingo, Congress of Muslim Ummah, and joining us out of India, a reporter with the Cognate, we've got Sister Rushda Khan. And to all the panelists, Sister Farhana, I see you already on screen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me on the show. Greetings of salam and peace to everyone.
Sister Fatima Domingo, assalamu alaikum to you. We appreciate you taking time out this evening.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to yourselves and our listeners and viewers. And I just want to say, Jazakallah khairan. I feel very privileged and honored to be part of this panel. Jazakallah khairan.
And out of India, with the Cognate, a reporter, Sister Rushda Fatima Khan. Sister Rushda, assalamu alaikum to you as well.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thanks for having me.
Right. Sister Rushda, I'm going to start off with you because you are based in India, and for a very, very long time now, we've seen this coming, and now we see what is taking place in Karnataka. We know that the matter is lying with the courts. But clearly, Indian society or Muslim society in India challenged in more ways than one. And the latest hijab ban in Karnataka is just another example on the spotlight and some of the challenges that Muslims are facing in that part of the world.
Right. Yes, that's very true. Particularly recently, we're seeing attacks directed to Muslim women. That is something new from the past, I would say, 1 or 2 years. So we saw before the hijab ban, this whole online auction, which was also directed at Muslim women. And there's also an increasing trend of online pages and platforms directed at portraying Muslim women in a very bad manner. But along with this is one aspect, that is this target on Muslim women particularly. Apart from that, there is also attack on any sort of physical representation of the Islamic faith. So that includes the hijab, the adhan, even halal meat for that matter. So they've had problems with anything that is in the public sphere that represents the presence of this faith in India. So they have always had, there have been issues in the past. For example, with the azan. Before that, there was an issue in near the capital city about praying salah in a public space. And now we have the hijab. And again, it's I believe compared to all the previous issues, this is getting more traction, and also the Muslims are resisting more strongly on this particular issue. I believe it has to do with the fact that it is more directly influencing our lives. So the other things, it wasn't very direct. Here every Muslim woman is at a point, she has to make a it's affecting us literally physically. We have to make a physical action and take off that hijab. So I believe because of the nature of what they've targeted, the resistance is higher, and due to which it has even gained the traction, a huge traction across the country and the world.
Yes, Jazakallah khairan for that, Sister Farhana. Now, we've seen for a very, very long time when we're looking at women, Muslim women in particular, and we've seen the spotlight on Muslim women, where Muslim women have come under the radar for various reasons. And we are talking about India, we're talking about the hijab ban, but we see it right across the entire world, where women, Muslim women in particular, have become soft targets. And looking at the hijab, just a simple piece of cloth that is actually seen as a threat. And as far as Muslim women are also concerned, in terms of being marginalized. And I think this is absolutely important for us to understand, and just to understand the thinking or the agenda behind marginalizing and stigmatizing Muslim women through a simple piece of cloth or like the hijab.
Yes, Brother Inayet, Muslims in India are already a marginalized community, and this sort of action or tactic by the BJP government is just another means for them to fulfill their Hindutva agenda against Muslims. We have seen how speech and anti-Muslim sentiment has catalyzed Hindutva mobs to exact violence against minorities, particularly Muslims. In India, throughout the world, we have seen Islamophobia and the banning of the hijab in France and other countries. It's sad that feminist movements will stand for the right to choose what to wear for everyone else, but when it comes to Muslim women, it's not so. The right to choose what to wear, your religious garment, is not is for Muslims, it's not recognized. So let's be clear about what's occurring in Karnataka. It's not just a simple row over the hijab or the school uniform, but a tactic of oppression orchestrated by malfeasant authorities against students because of their faith. And we know that the beauty of a pluralistic democracy as envisioned in India's constitution engenders society that thrives on inclusivity and respect for all religions. But that's not so in India today. This is clearly Islamophobia at play. For years, students of different religious backgrounds have been allowed to wear religious symbols and religious attire, like the hijab, without issue. This call for the hijab ban is just another tactic of the Hindu ethno-fascist government and Hindutva leaders to fulfill the Hindutva agenda, excluding other religious minorities, particularly Muslim minorities. We know that the government of Karnataka is ruled by Prime Minister Modi's Hindu nationalist BJP party, the political wing of the RSS. And the government officials and other Hindutva leaders are using this opportunity to further vilify and dehumanize Muslims, who are already a marginalized, once again, as I mentioned. These attempts of othering Muslim students is another marker of genocide. And that there have been calls for genocide recently, brazen calls for genocide against Muslims, for mass murder of Muslims. There were religious parliaments held in December and a few months before and after that, calling for mass murder of Muslims. So there's this Islamophobia at play, and this is just not a simple row over the hijab.
Jazakallah for that, Sister Farhana and Sister Fatima. Just to bring you in now, there are two issues here, and when one looks at the BJP and the government trying to defend this ban, they talk about disturbing uniformity among students. They talk about the concept of avoiding discrimination. But here we're talking about a religious symbol, we're talking about a religious requirement like the hijab, and how would that disturb uniformity, how that obviously prevent any form of discrimination. So, and just your thoughts on this argument that is made by the fundamentalist group and the BJP government in trying to justify this hijab ban.
Yes, what they've basically done is this is our faith. Our faith has given us the right to choose 1400 years ago, before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights told me to. My Creator has given me that right, and the Prophet ﷺ, has given us that right. So before the Declaration of Human Rights, and the United Nations has become a toothless organization because they haven't really intervened. And so it is left up to us as Muslims and lovers of human rights and the freedom of human beings to go and then organize this march that we're doing on the 25th of March. And we'd like to call our brothers and sisters to please come and show solidarity and show up in the numbers, because the Creator has given us this. He has said to us that we must stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah. And the believers are tasked with upholding justice. So also the Prophet ﷺ, if I can just remind everybody, has said, if you have seen an injustice, change it with your hand. If not with your hand, with your mouth. If not with your mouth, with your heart, and that is the weakest of faith. So let us, action is the highest form of iman. So please, let us show our sisters, our suffering sisters in India, let us show solidarity by joining this march next week on the 25th at the Indian consulate. I'd like you to come out in your numbers, not only the sisters, but the brothers as well. This is, if you know, the Ummah, the Prophet ﷺ has said, if the hand hurts, the whole body hurts. An injury to one is an injury to all. So, and this is also, India has a history of discrimination and oppression, not only of Muslim women, but non-Muslim women. The highest female infanticide in the world is in India. I mean, the Creator said He's going to call the girl child on the day of judgment and ask, what crime were you killed for? And so many girl children are killed because the dowry it's expected from the girl, the parents. Traditionally, the girl child has to pay the dowry in that tradition. I'm not attacking the tradition, I'm attacking the female infanticide. So it's a myriad of social injustice that we are going to be challenging, inshallah.
Jazakallah for that. And just to bring Sister Rushda back into the discussion. Now, Sister Rushda, the fact of the matter is this is taking place in Karnataka. And as Sister Farhana said, this has been a build-up. There have been calls for genocide. There have been so much. And when one looks at Karnataka in particular, where one looks at the activities or the rise in activities of these Hindutva groups and how they've been targeting the religious minorities. We're not only talking about Muslims here, we're talking about Christians as well. We've heard about the laws that have been passed that bans religious conversions as well. We've seen how Christian leaders, Christians over Christmas, were targeted as well. And just to understand Karnataka, because I quite can't remember his name, but obviously at the head of all of this is the yogi, or the infamous yogi that we know about, and we know that elections are also due to take place in that part of the world. And again, another a move on the part of those that are seeking to be re-elected. Easy pickings, create this fear of Muslims, create Islamophobic sentiments, and through the hijab, once again, this is a state that is become a cesspool of hate, for want of a better term, to all the intimidation with the hijab issue taking place.
Right. From a few years, there usually before the influence of the BJP and the right wing politics was much lower in southern India, where Karnataka is. It was their influence was much higher in states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, where you mentioned Yogi, who is the chief minister there. But then we've seen the BJP come to power in Karnataka a few years back, and from then there has been a rise, of course, in such sentiments. Now another thing that has to be pointed out is these regions, it's not something new. There has always been this sort of sentiment from ages, like from a lot of years. But then what happens is when this government is at power, it emboldens these groups, and they are backed, they get backing. So they do not fear repercussion that they would face under a different government. So it emboldens them basically. And then in Karnataka, as you rightly mentioned, we had the anti-conversion law that was passed. It's not yet a law, but then in the pretext of that law being, in the process of that law being passed, we saw a lot of attacks on Christians in Karnataka, multiple attacks over a week in their churches, to the pastors in the church, accusing them of forced conversions, unproven forced conversions. And just a few weeks before that, there was a lynching of a Muslim man called Arbaz, over his relationship with a Hindu woman. So such things. And in January, few weeks before the hijab issue, there was another lynching of a Muslim boy who was just returning back from his house in a district very close to where the hijab issue started off. So that was also done by the RSS workers. So every week there is a story coming out from these. Within Karnataka, the main ground is the coastal region. So every week there is some sort of story coming from there. And there is clearly a rise in right wing influence in these regions. And about the elections, yes, there are many people who are saying that these moves are probably happening to serve electoral benefits. But this is, others are saying that's not true. This is just part of their larger agenda in general. This is why they came to power, in order to suppress the minorities and push forward their agenda. So they're saying, irrespective of the electoral angle, this is still something that they do want to do, and they would do it irrespective of election or no elections.
Yes. Now, Sister Farhana, let's just talk about what does this actually mean for Indian society. And when one talks about polarization of a society, and the hijab ban would present an ideal platform. And particularly when one looks at where this has been implemented, it's been implemented in colleges. If we're talking about using education to express a certain ideology, a hateful ideology. So this is now being taken, or this hateful Hindutva ideology is now taken at grassroots level. We're talking about young people, polarizing them, getting them to hate each other. And we've seen it. We've seen it on social media. We've seen so much come through by way of video clips where we've seen this young girl standing up to hordes of these people. We've seen how they are being treated. We've seen some very, very disturbing images coming through where people have been beaten up, where they've been forced to take off their hijab. So all of this is creating a huge problem in terms of polarization.
That is true, Brother Inayet. It's in dismay that we watch as these young students are being forced to either choose between an education and their religion. They are being told that they are not worthy of receiving an education because of their Muslim identity. And millions of Muslim women across the globe choose to wear the hijab as an article of faith. And it's outrageous that they have to make this choice between an education and their practice versus their practice of faith. This will also further marginalize these young students, because if they cannot receive an education, they will be rendered economically powerless. Without education, they will not be able to secure well-paying jobs. This, for young victims, this must be, I mean, we have been watching it on screen videos, but I can't imagine what these young students are going through, where it must be a profoundly traumatizing experience. The visuals of large mobs of mostly men surrounding young girls and threatening and hurling abuses at them. One cannot imagine the depth of pain, suffering, and fear that these young women must be experiencing. Any civilized person and society will speak out against this outrageous conduct. And that's why I would like to mirror what Sister Fatima said, that it is incumbent on each one of us to do as much as we can to speak out and act against. In the Indian context, the visuals of these men taunting and threatening women and being lauded strengthens the forces of hate and intolerance. Articles 14 and 25 of the Indian Constitution guarantees the right to education and religious freedom. Banning of religious attire is religious discrimination, which is a violation of one's human rights. And I would just like to quote our ambassador at large for international religious freedom in the US, Rashad Hussain, when he stated on Twitter quite articulately, religious freedom includes the ability to choose one's religious attire. The Indian state of Karnataka should not determine permissibility of religious clothing. Hijab bans in schools violate religious freedom and stigmatize and marginalize women and girls. And since then, social media has been a buzz with slogans and hashtags such as hijab rights are human rights. Hijab is our right. We need to stand up for these young girls and the Muslim teachers in Karnataka.
Yes, and Sister Fatima, just this last statement from Sister Farhana in terms of we need to be standing up. And this obviously is what you are calling for in terms of the action that is proposed next week. Because one cannot ignore the fact, one cannot ignore the horrific visuals that we see coming through about these girls, about they being humiliated. We've seen it in the past. We see it right across Europe. We've seen it in France, how
Absolutely.
French police had basically terrorized Muslim women for wearing the burkini. And this is clear that in obviously expressing our religious beliefs, our sisters are being humiliated to such an extent where we cannot sit silent anymore, we cannot be quiet anymore. And this is not only about Muslim women, this is about Muslim men, because we need to stand up, we need to protect our sisters when they are faced with this type of dilemma and when they're faced with this type of oppression and discrimination.
Absolutely. And you see, this campaign is unrelenting. It France has also given these young women the choice between, it's either you get educated or you express your religious symbols wearing your hijab. You need to choose between that and your education. And let's also not forget what happened to our sisters in Bosnia Herzegovina. So this campaign against Muslim women, and they know what this is all about, because women are the backbone of every struggle. And women, the symbol of purity, as well as the woman, as the creator has chosen her womb in which to carry his creation. So when you compromise the dignity and honor of a woman, you compromise the dignity and honor of the whole community as a whole. So as a collective, we need to stand up. Their campaign is unrelenting. Our campaign has to be unrelenting. And we make the effort, we make the niyyah, and we leave the rest up to Allah. As long as we make the intention and the niyyah and the effort, Allah will do the rest. As He says, He will not change the condition of a people who will not change their own condition. So inshallah, we ask Allah to accept our niyyah, and then we are going to wage an unrelenting campaign, because it's not just going to be about one march. It's going to have to be a sustained campaign, because they're starting again in Bosnia. They are starting in the Balkans again. And we know what happened to our sisters in Bosnia Herzegovina. We cannot have a repeat of that. So it is a global issue. You can see in France, in Europe, this campaign against Islam is increasing. And even the attacks in New Zealand against that masjid, you can see that fascism, Islamophobia, and all of these extremist groups it's dangerous what's happening right now. And it seems that the main campaign are believers and Muslims at large. So our campaign has to be also, we have to stand up for truth and justice. And in that way, Allah will, inshallah, grant us victory. Ameen.
Yes, Sister Rushda, as Fatima mentions, she talks about a sustained campaign. And this obviously has been a sustained campaign on the part of the BJP, on the part of the RSS, and all these radical groups in India, but together with the media. And I just like your thoughts on the Indian media on this particular issue of the hijab ban, because we know that India is a country that is so diverse. We see many Indians displaying their religion through attire. We see Hindus doing it. We see Muslims doing it. We see Christians doing it. We see the Sikhs doing it as well. Now, this is a country that is so diverse, but again, to basically pick out one particular group, to pick out the Muslim woman again, and just to understand how is this playing out in the media, particularly in mainstream media, Sister Rushda.
Yes, the mainstream media coverage has been what the activists here have been mentioning about the media coverage is that they are asking the wrong questions. That's what is being said. Now there's more debate in the Indian media about hijab in itself, about the fact, is hijab a choice or not? Are these girls wearing the hijab because their parents are telling them to? Is it the whole hijab debate is consuming more media time than the fact that they are being denied education because of the hijab. Initially, this is how it started off, and later it received a lot of backlash. It has come down a bit now from a few days, but then the reason of for it to come down is because these girls have been openly in the mics telling the media that it is their choice, and they say it very defiantly and very beautifully. So the media can't really push that narrative anymore, because the girls have been expressing themselves very defiantly and accurately. So later on, the media now, um, what we see here is there are Muslim organizations in Karnataka who help these girls put out their demands. Um, so there was a group here. Initially, when the girls had an issue with the college, they approached this Muslim organization and tell them they're going through this. And the Muslim organization takes up the issue, tells the media about it, speaks to the college authorities, basically helps these girls out, right? Now, what the media does, it starts demonizing this particular organization, accusing them of a conspiracy to cause communal tensions in the state. So this is something, it's happening at a very large scale. This is what almost every mainstream media in the country is talking about. So they're talking about something called a larger conspiracy. Sometimes some of them are terming it an international conspiracy, and they're asking questions like, why are other countries, particularly Muslim countries, so involved in the hijab issue? And accusing groups here who are trying to sort of mobilize efforts to get these girls back their rights, they're accusing them of actually causing communal tensions in the state. Um, what happens is, when they do this, the public support decreases. When it's only about the girls, it's a very different story. Like, people want to support them and stay. But then when the media portrays it as something, like a conspiracy, something larger, a hidden plot, the public support decreases. They sort of back off. So I believe that's their agenda in doing this. But this is what is the current scene. They're trying to make it seem like something very um, they're trying to hype it up, sort of, so that the human angle to it is lost.
Sister Farhana, I think just, from what Sister Fatima is talking, we're talking about the media and we're talking about the energy of the media, and particularly when one looks at the mainstream media in India, we know they've been captured by the BJP. We know that they've been promoting this ideology for a very, very long time. They've been promoting Islamophobia, and with their energies being misdirected and also from what Sister Rita is saying, not asking the right questions. They debating on whether a girl is forced to wear hijab from home or not. And that shouldn't be the debate. Those shouldn't be the questions that should be asked. Because the key issue, and I think one of the advocates made a comment in this when this matter has now gone to the Karnataka court, where he says they are being asked to choose between faith and education. He says that this violates fundamental human rights. The purpose of the Education Act is to promote harmony and not to create dissent among students. And for me, that is important, that is profound, and that is absolutely critical, Sister Farhana.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, we can see that this is just as an excuse. The right, I mean, they've been trying to say that the girls are being forced to wear the hijab. It's just an excuse for them to carry out their Islamophobic laws and acts and to target Muslim communities again. And so I just want to point out that the silence of the overwhelmingly majority Muslim countries regarding this is sadly deafening. There has been no criticism from governments except a mild statement from the Organization of Islamic Conference. One would have expected that Muslim majority countries be outraged at what is currently occurring in India. Most of the criticism has been coming from NGOs that operate in Western countries. Like you said, feminist movements have not, they're talking about the right to choose and girls being forced to choose what to wear, but feminist movements are not standing up for Muslim women's choice to wear what they want to wear, and not respecting their religious choice to wear what they want to wear according to their faith.
Yes, in fact, Sister Farhana, just on that subject, and while you've got the thought with regard to the Muslim countries and the lack of response or no response whatsoever on the part of Muslim countries, and we've seen this over and over again. Every time there has been an issue that has affected Muslims, whether it's been France with the hijab ban, whether it's been Denmark, whether we've seen, the burning of the Quran, whether we're seeing Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's name obviously being dragged down, where we see it over and over again happening. But we've never ever seen these Muslim countries stand up. We've never ever seen them taking a standpoint. And also looking at Muslim countries, you mentioned the OIC, but also the leadership in the Muslim countries, in the Muslim world in general. And here I want to talk about the Arab world. And last week, I read a very, very interesting article looking at Saudi Arabia, for instance, looking at what is taking place in South Africa, and are we surprised that they are not responding, where we've learned that with the advent of Islam, with the message of Islam was to take Saudi Arabia out of darkness into the light. And that was the core and fundamental message of Islam. But what is happening now is taking them out of light and back into darkness. So are we surprised that there is no response or a lack of response?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Given what is taking place in Saudi Arabia right now, I'm not surprised at all. What we know and regard Saudi Arabia as the place of the two harams, and this thing, everything has changed right now, and they have removed all sorts of historical artifacts and places of, I mean, the whole place has just changed. And I'm not surprised with all the concerts that are going on now and the so-called westernization and progression of Saudi Arabia. It has definitely gone into darkness.
Yes, Jazakallah for that. Sister Fatima, right, obviously, just looking at some of the key issues that we've spoken about, and again, I think just following up from this comment about the lack of leadership in the Muslim world to take on issues. And as Sister Farhana mentioned, when one looks at the responses right across the entire world to this Karnataka hijab ban, is it's come from NGOs, it's come from ordinary people, it's come from people on the ground. And as you mentioned, it's got to be a sustained campaign. It's got to be a campaign that has got to be continuous and not a soda water bottle effect, where we know things are heated at this point in time. So we go, we shout a few slogans, we display a few banners, and we've forgotten about it. But at the same time, the campaign of these extremist groups is a sustained campaign. Today it's about the hijab. Tomorrow it's going to be about something else. Then it's going to be about the masjids. It's going to be, and it's going to be an ongoing campaign. And that is why it is absolutely necessary for us to make sure that we maintain the pressure, and at the same time make sure that this is a sustained campaign to keep up that pressure.
Yes, and also, the ulama are the inheritors of the Anbiya, alayhi salam. They are supposed to be inheriting this sacred knowledge, the mantle of truth and the mantle of justice. So our issue is also that we don't have muttaqi leadership. We don't have proper leadership, because then they would lead from the front. And then we have this fragmented ummah. We don't see that if our sisters are being attacked in India, it is our problem as well. Because as the Prophet ﷺ said, if the hand hurts, the whole body hurts. And so those are the two issues that's really burning in the ummah at the moment, is the lack of leadership and the lack of unity. And the fragmentation, that we cannot do things as a collective. And that's very, very important, because even in our salah, we say, Ihdina siratal mustaqim. We're asking Allah, we're saying it as, we're not asking Allah just to guide me, but as a collective. So even when we are when we are standing up for social justice, and we are standing up for truth and justice, we have to do this as a collective. That's very, very important. We cannot just do it as one person, and it has to be in terms of us getting onto the same page and understanding that this is the purpose for which the Creator has created us, and that is what we have to strive with, our goods, our lives, our health. And then that is as the Creator has told us, that is the achievement supreme. So, and we have to do this as a collective. That's very, very important, with correct leadership.
Yes, Sister Rusha, just talking about leadership and the Muslim leadership in India, looking at the various ulama body and people in leadership positions, how have they responded to the events of Karnataka?
Well, honestly, there has been a lot of internal conflict on this issue within the different Muslim groups we have here. There have been a lot of vested interests, like they've been disagreeing with each other on what would be the ideal way to respond to this issue. So as was mentioning before about the media targeting this particular organization, so the organization that decided to take it up and fight for this cause, what happens when they take the leadership is that they are targeted, and then they are painted in a very dark they're given a very dark image about the organization throughout the media. So to avoid all of this, sometimes Muslim organizations back off. So if talking particularly about the ulama, there has been complete silence. Coming to other so-called socio-political groups, student groups, Muslim student groups, they're the ones who are sort of pushing for it a little bit here and there. We've had some protests. They've been basically the activism, it's all done by them. Apart from that, we have open letters written by Muslim and non-Muslim social rights workers. But from the when we're talking from the perspective of the ummah, uh, the ulama are completely quiet. There has been no response from them from in this issue at all.
Yes, Sister Farhana, obviously, it's said when we find that leadership are not assuming the leadership roles that they need to assume, particularly at a critical time like this. And we are talking about the ulama, but it's not only about the ulama, it's about leadership in general. And it's not that we lack the capacity, or we lack the leadership. We've got many people in leadership, but we need to obviously talk about this. We need to bring it out in the open. We need to use any platforms that we have at our disposal, like we are using this platform here at Salam Media tonight, and making use of media, making use of alternative media, making use of social media as well, to voice our voices against the type of behavior that is taking place, but also looking at our own educational institutions. And we who are blessed with educational institutions, we've got Muslim schools, we've got Muslim institutions, we've got madrasas, we've got masajids, we've got many students in university, we've got Muslim Students Association, and all of that put together, this is a critical time, and this is where this discussion needs to be taking place, Sister Farhana.
Yes, as far as global pressure on India, it's important that individuals reach out to their governments, like we do in the US, to advocate for against these atrocities that are taking place in India. Here, the governments must pressure India to hold these perpetrators that spew hateful rhetoric against Muslims in India accountable, because they've unleashed and catalyzed these Hindutva mobs against Muslims and other minorities. What we have done in the US is we reach out to congressmen and senators to get them to sign on to bills in Congress and in the Senate to pressure India and to sanction perpetrators that spew this hateful rhetoric. Another thing that we do is we have reached out, Justice for All has reached out to the UN to ask them to pressure India, and Amnesty, and we reach out to the State Department. So similarly, in South Africa and other countries, I think it's important that individuals reach out to their government officials and require them to pressure India against these sort of hateful Islamophobic acts against Muslims and other religious minorities, because religious freedom is a human right. Here in the US, colleges and MSAs have been very active and vocal on social media. And as far as there have been protests across the country in front of the Indian consulates and Indian embassy. So I think all that will have an effect, hopefully, inshallah.
Inshallah. Yes, Sister Fatima, as we're saying, putting pressure, and Next Week Initiative is just one of them, but just also to understand taking this matter to the South African government. Now, I see there's a quick message that's come up on the screen. Mohammed Amir Khan writes, Indian mainstream media is totally against the Muslim community and running propaganda against Muslims and instigating non-Muslim people against Muslims. Well, Jazakallah for that comment, Mohammed Amir Khan. And the next one says, the coup on the Ummah is in progress. Is it because we are afraid? Now, that is the question that is being raised. Is it because we are afraid? But I think the key issue here is just, I see Mohammed Amir Khan is written again. Sorry about that. Modi government has adopted the divide and rule policy in India. Yes, we need to obviously recognize the fact that they will try and divide us. But Sister Fatima, just looking at part of the campaign and talking, obviously going to the Indian embassy is one issue, but looking at South Africa, we enjoy very, very close relationships with India. And we've seen it over and over again, not only on the matter of Karnataka, but then over and over again, we know the issue of Kashmir has come up, and we know that there have been a number of Kashmiri action groups that have taken this matter up with our government in terms of their relationship. Like, for instance, we've seen the BDS campaign as far as Palestine is concerned. But when it comes to India and its atrocities, because whatever we see is happening in Palestine is mirrored by the Indian government in Kashmir and in India as well, and they work hand in hand. So I'm talking about taking this campaign to the South African government, as Sister Farhana says.
Yes, the BDS movement has been, to a large extent, quite successful. So perhaps that would be another avenue. And speaking to our government in terms of trade relations and boycotts and so on. However, what we are finding is that there are certain groups that are trying to now hijack movements like BDS, and that's coming from the LGBTQ community. There's another issue. You cannot say anything these days against that community, LGBTQ, without being castigated and told you are being, what's the word, you are being bigoted. However, it is okay for people to go in onto this disproportionate campaign against Muslim women and the hijab, and then on the other hand you have that type of thing. So that is another dimension to this whole movement. However, I do think it is a good diplomatic way of trying to solve this issue, and we have to leave. We can speak to our ambassadors and speak to our government officials. However, we're not sure how far they would take this campaign and what changes they'll make in terms of India is a huge, rice comes from the pharmaceutical manufacturing. A lot of it is manufactured in India, so it's a huge. There's many corporates that we could look at, but I'm not sure. That is something that I would leave to our sister Farhana. She could perhaps comment more on diplomacy, etc.
Jazakallah for that. I see we've got about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm just going to go around the panel. Sister Rusha, just starting with you, just some final thoughts on what we have been talking about.
Yes. So I would say, as a journalist reporting from here, it's becoming really important to document the resistance that is appearing to the ban, because while you mentioned about the media, what the media is also trying to do is portray an image that shows that everything is going smooth, which it's actually not going smooth. The girls are resisting. The girls are saying no, they will not take off their hijabs. So here we're trying to make sure all that is documented. The resistance to this move is documented. And I believe also, as you all were discussing, the international reactions need to be documented. So these are things that would put pressure on the government. The fact that the students are resisting, the international community is also resisting. So these need to be documented and amplified in order to hopefully get some changes to this move.
Jazakallah for that, Sister Farhana. Final thoughts from you.
I would just say that, as Sister Rushta mentioned, that it's so important for us to just keep the pressure on, keep pointing out that these girls have the right to an education, they have a right to religious freedom, they have the right to wear what they choose, as in religious attire, and just keep the pressure on keep writing to we keep writing to our elected officials here. We keep pressuring the UN and Amnesty, and just be vocal about it. But just on social media, I mean, the Hindutva trolls are scary, but just keep at it. Just keep at it, and it's incumbent on us to do our best to protect the vulnerable and marginalized Muslim community in India.
Shukran for that. And Sister Fatima, just looking at next week's protest action that is taking place, and if you could just share some information in closing.
It's going to be a hands-off hijab protest at the Indian Consulate in Johannesburg, 1 Eaton Road, corner Jan Smuts Avenue in Parktown, 25th of February at 2 p.m. please, we'd love to see all our sisters and brothers join. Let's show solidarity with our sisters and mothers of India. And it's not only with India, it's also all the sisters and the Muslims suffering across the globe. So please, I'd like to see us come out in our numbers on next week Friday, inshallah. Please, after Jummah. And then Brother Salman has asked me, he's the main convener of this protest action. He said what we do need is bottled water, some financial donations if people do have, reflective jackets for the marshals and sound systems. And we don't, he said participation, normally we have just 50 to 100 people. We'd like to see people come out in their numbers, inshallah, next week Friday.
Well, inshallah, Jazakallah khairan so much for that to you, Sister Farhana Kara Motala, Rishda Fatima Khan, and Sister Fatima Domingo. Jazakallah to all of you. We appreciate you taking time out, talking to us this evening here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that was the end of part one of tonight's discussion, Wednesday nights with myself, Inayet Wadee. We're going to go for a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Mazhar Khan, who is in South Africa at this point in time. And we're going to take a general overview of the current status of the Muslim world. It's a very, very interesting discussion because there are so many dimensions when one looks at the Muslim world, when one looks at the challenges. And obviously, when we're talking about the Muslim world, we include people like the Muslims in India who are faced with more challenges in terms of what we are talking about. But it is going to be quite a dynamic, quite an interesting discussion. So stay with us. Don't go away.